Call into order the Tuesday, February 5th, 2013 meeting of the Township of South Orange Village Board of Adjustment. May we have a roll call?
Yes, Mr. Don,
Still here.
Mr. DeScala,
Here.
Mr. Groman, Mr. Parlapiano,
Here.
Mr. Reeves,
Here.
Mr. Semper,
Here.
Mr. Adler,
Here.
Mr. Shapiro, and Ms. Werwin.
Here.
Pursuant to Section 5, Chapter 231, PL 1975, this is to state for the record that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the public by posting and maintaining the annual notice of regular meetings on the bulletin board in Village Hall, by publishing the annual notice of regular meetings for 2013 in the December 2012 edition of the South Orange Maplewood News Record, and by filing said notice in the office of the village clerk. First order of business is approval of minutes for our meeting on Thursday, January 3rd. Does anybody have any comments about these minutes that were electronically distributed?
I've read them. They look fine.
Nobody has any comments? May we have a motion?
I move we accept the minutes as written. Second.
Okay, Mr. Don,
Yes.
Mr. DeScala,
Yes.
Mr. Parlapiano,
Abstain.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Semper,
Yes.
Mr. Adler,
Yes.
and Ms. Werwin.
Yes.
Okay, we actually do have a item for business that isn't on the agenda, but that we need to do, and that is the swearing in of the engineer and the planner. Actually, is something that our attorney
Right.
suggested that we do. This will be for the year.
For the year, for any factual testimony that you give, would you please raise your right hands? Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you give before this board for the year of 2013 shall be the whole truth?
Yes, I do.
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Susan Gruhl, 236 Broad Street, Red Bank, New Jersey. That's my office address.
Salvatore Renda, 67 Harvard Avenue, Maplewood.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we move on to case 999, Garden State Property Management, application for completeness at 175 Tishner Avenue. They propose to construct a two-family house after demolition of the existing house. So gentlemen, you're the attorney?
Yes,
Okay, why don't you go ahead and state your name?
sure. Greg Rao, R-A-O.
And sir, what's your name?
Rahim, R-A-H-I-M, last name Munir, M-U-N-I-R.
Okay, Mr. Munir, what capacity you
I
have?
work at the company, so I'm familiar with the file.
We're both
I've done a
attorneys.
lot of the groundwork, the paperwork, things like that, to get it submitted, so.
All right, do we need to swear in? Yes, we don't need to swear in anybody, do we? Okay. All right, so you all, sometimes the applicant doesn't need to say anything, but if you want to start out saying something, otherwise we're just going to go straight to Ms. Gruhl's testimony, her review as the planner, and kind of go over the elements. Did you all have anything to introduce this completeness?
I just think briefly, really briefly, we're potentially applying for 3 variances. There's a old house there it's from the 1800s that is certainly an eyesore. We're proposing a very nice two-family house in a conforming two-family zone. We're looking for 1 variance for the 1 driveway per unit with the curb cut issue. And also, as well, we may or may not need, depending, we've ordered a site plan, and that's in the works. We should have that in a few days for the 25-foot or the average thereof for 200C. So that may not be an issue. So just the 2 variances with the parking, the curb cut and the parking.
Okay. All right, very good. Anything else at this moment? Okay, so Ms. Gruhl, do you want to introduce your review of completeness here?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I believe all the board members have a memo from us, even though there was a technical error that it says the planning board, it should say the zoning board. I apologize. The memo is dated January 29th of this year, and our review, we lay out the checklist items and where they have complied, and where we recommend a waiver. We do recommend, though, that the application be deemed conditionally complete, subject to filing at least 2 weeks prior to the scheduled hearing. Regarding the setbacks, they did not deal with the setbacks, and we recommend that as part of your review, you really do need that information. And so that's where we suggest and recommend that it's conditionally complete, subject to that submission.
I'd like to also make one other suggestion, if we could, that with regard to item 44, I don't have an issue with granting the exception right now, but I think based on the context of the neighborhood and the fact that we will be dealing with potentially an average front yard situation, that it would probably be good to see the properties within 200 feet, if we're using those as an average.
I think that's an excellent idea, because you are going to have to, in submitting prevailing or whatever, you're going to have to do that anyway. So that's totally.
The board would like pictures?
Yes.
Yeah, I would
We
think,
have those, so
yeah.
that's fine. And those are just adjacent properties on the same side of the street we're talking about, or both sides?
Within 200 feet.
Because I think your calculation is going to be based on the properties on that street, so it'd be good to see them, picture, and also on the site plan, how far back from the property line they are.
Sounds good.
Especially since the 3 directly to the left are exactly the same as the house you're proposing.
Exactly.
So,
Okay, Ms. Gruhl, I'd like you to take us through the items here, so we can just, in case anybody has any questions, and you can march us through them very quickly.
Okay.
If nobody has anything to say. So we start with item 10.
Item 10 is a letter from the utility companies. We believe that that is something that's already an existing house there, so it's pretty much addressed in terms of a waiver.
Okay.
11, which is the county planning board, an application to the county planning board. It's located on a local road rather than a county road, so we don't have an issue with that. The Essex County Health Department, we believe that that really is not necessary because of the nature of the application. Number 13, the Soil Conservation District Soil Erosion Control Plan. That we believe can be granted a waiver on too, because we do not believe.
Isn't there a percent of the site
Yes,
being
that's what-
disturbed test?
That's exactly, and we believe that they meet that.
Oh, so you've looked at that and you
It's
say.
under the percent,
so this,
so,
item 12 says you take no exception to the granting of the waiver.
right,
Item 13 says no exception to the granting of the waiver for completeness.
for completeness.
What, does that mean we should anticipate something on item 13 in the future?
Well, regarding item 13, soil conservation, they would be required to get a soil conservation permit depending on the amount of disturbance of the property.
And
So
that's-
for completeness, they don't need the permit for the board to hear it, but
That would be a
it would be a requirement, it's actually a requirement by law for them to get a soil disturbance permit from the county if they exceed the soil disturbance. And that could change based on the application, things can be adjusted in that way, so. But for completeness, in order for the board to hear it, I don't think they need the application.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Mr. Adler?
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead, Ms. Gruhl. Item 14.
Item 14 is copies of DOT or DEP approvals for completeness. Again, we don't believe that that's, that's an issue for completeness, but again, as Sal says, and as Pat always puts in, subject to any outside requirements, so that would be covered if in fact there was a need for any other permits from any other entities. 16, not submitted a final plat site plan. Well, it's not really necessary in this instance. It's all the same. So, and they'll submit a final site plan prior to final approval, but at this point, again, for completeness, it's not necessary. Number
That
20.
means it's going to show up to be mailed to us before our hearing?
No.
No, the final site plan would be,
Approval.
after the application is heard and approved, because there may be conditions put on the application, the applicant
Correct.
would prepare final site plan showing what, incorporating those conditions that the board might put on the application.
Again, this is just for completeness, and we note in our memo that as the hearing progresses, you may have questions where there may be subsequent information and supplemental information that you ask for to hear. So that is noted in this memo, that may be the case, and the applicant is aware
I
of
have a
that.
question, Sal. So does the building department, as a matter of course, require that the conditions of approval be on the final site plan? Listed on the final site plan? Because that would make it a lot easier for enforcement.
For the building department?
If they put the conditions of approval on the final site plan, everyone who sees it would know exactly what the board had asked them to do.
Well, that or, depending on the condition, that or a copy of the resolution listing the conditions would be included in any building permits. And any approvals or resolutions that the board approves, the building department gets a copy of that. The final site plan, typically what happens is, once the final site plan is done and approved, signed off on by the chairman, the secretary, and me, it's attached to whatever building permits, whatever they apply for building permits, so that there is a copy of the plan as approved in with the building permits. Typically, the building department's not looking so closely at the site plan, they're looking more at the construction drawings for foundations, framing, things like that, plumbing, electrical, those types of permits. But the site plan would be attached to that, which would reflect the site improvements, heights, things like that, building heights, things like that, which the other plans have to conform to. So, and it's a
Do you think it's a
two-step
good
process.
idea? Do you think it's a good idea to require that?
Require?
That the final site plans reflect any conditions in the approval? Because sometimes building department doesn't really look at the conditions in the resolution. Sometimes they don't, there's a disconnect.
Before the building department will issue a permit, it's going to come through my office for zoning approval. Zoning approval would incorporate any of the conditions or any of the approvals that the board has. So when they submit their documents to the building department for a permit, the packet comes into our office, we review it, compare it to any conditions or any approved site plan drawings, and make sure that what they're building is what was approved, and then gets kicked back to the building department, and then they issue the permits for construction. If there's something that's different or changes, we go back to the applicant and we let them know that, well, wait a second, it's only supposed to be 32 feet high and it's 33 feet high, so you need to cut it down or you have to go back to the board. So they have to get basically a zoning approval. Zoning approval is for single-family houses. Typically, it doesn't come before the board. For site plan approvals, would come before either this board or the planning board. Those approvals, those resolutions would be attached to the application and the building permits. So we just compare to make sure that what they're going to build reflects what was approved.
I'm just wondering whether or not we should at least say on the final plans, this is subject to a resolution passed by the zoning board or planning board on such and such a date, so that anyone who sees that knows there were conditions. And I understand that you review it and it comes to you and the zoning officer makes sure that there's compliance, but sometimes it seems that, especially down the road, there isn't. After construction starts or after construction ends, something's different from what was approved. And by putting it right on the plans, at least some indication of the resolution, then everyone supposedly would be on notice.
If during construction, there may be changes, there may be adjustments, there may be things that need to be done, unforeseen conditions. If there is something in a resolution or there's a condition in the resolution that would prohibit that type of a change, or the ordinance setback height requirements, things like that would prohibit that type of change, then the applicant, they wouldn't be permitted to make that change, or if they make that change on their own, when it comes time to sign off on the final CO, they won't get the CO unless they fix it and put it back to what was approved by the board or what fits within the zoning.
All right.
I mean,
I'm-
the plan that they have
The
here,
applicant's fine with my question, Mr. Chairman.
you know, the plan that they have here, I mean, you know, where the windows are located may not be exactly where the windows are located when they're done, or, but it has to, if they're looking for a variance for something, what they're building has to fit within whatever variance was approved. It has to fit within whatever conditions were placed on the application.
I see your point. I think we need to have this discussion offline here, because you're proposing some tightening up of how information is conveyed on decisions and how it's communicated. But that's something that's not peculiar to this, and we can't really enforce it for this one applicant. We'd have to make a change. So
Right.
we can discuss after the meeting if we want to. Okay. All right, we move on to item 29. Ms. Gruhl?
That is, requires plans to be signed and sealed by whatever professional. Our opinion is there is no waiver required from that, because it has been signed and sealed.
Okay.
Item 31, historic districts or sites, any information. The site is not located in a historic district.
Okay.
33, this is the one that we spoke about, the side, front, and rear yards and the setbacks. And that's the one that we suggest be submitted.
Well, not suggest, y'all are gonna put those in there, right?
Yes, sir, that's been ordered.
Okay,
We should
because
have
I
it within-
even missed those.
Yeah, we'll have it within 7 days. they
Okay.
said. That's
All right.
being done now.
Okay, let's move on.
36, although they identified some trees, they did not identify all trees, but we take no exception to that. Although we would say that as the applicant goes through the hearing, if the board has any questions, that certainly that would be something that would have to be addressed. Item 37, existing wells or septic systems on or within 100 feet of the property. We did not receive any information to indicate that there were septics or wells. And so we would recommend that for completeness, that a waiver could be granted. Sal?
I agree. I just think that the applicant should be prepared to provide testimony, that their wells or septic systems don't exist on the site. Just to be sure if there's any way that they can provide that.
Don't exist on the current site.
On the current site,
So
yeah.
they don't have to provide testimony within 100 feet of the property? And how are they gonna know?
I would suggest a waiver on the 100 feet of the property. I would just the property itself that's in question. I think that if they can just provide testimony at the hearing that there are no wells, there may have been a septic system in the early 1900s, but it's no longer in use. Obviously, they're connecting to the sanitary sewer, the town sewer.
Okay, item 44.
44 is the one that we spoke about in relation to the front side and rear yard, that the adjacent areas within the structures within 200 feet should be identified, particularly as it relates to identifying prevailing and front yard and such. So
Okay. And so those are gonna be the photos that the applicant provides?
I believe that it would be more than that. It would be the actual location on a plan that indicates the location of the existing structures within 200 feet. Is the applicant willing to,
Do we need that for the setback?
for the
For the
setback?
front yard setback? Do we need that?
We need it.
I think we should have it.
Yeah.
If we're
Right.
basing it on an average of, that should be on the site plan, and then the pictures could help to illustrate, this is what this building looks like with a setback of X.
Yeah, I don't like granting this waiver. This is something that gives context also to an application, not just for setbacks, but also gives context to the design of the particular house. Is this in keeping with the neighborhood, in the size of the house? And so it provides other useful information as well. So I'm not keen on granting this waiver.
I think we're just granting it for the purposes of completeness, not for the actual
That's fine.
application.
Yeah, we can say it's complete, but we want to see it then for the
Right.
for the actual application, okay?
Okay, just to be clear, so for 200 feet, the board would like this information on properties not only adjacent on Tishner, but behind as well, or just on the street
Well,
itself?
I think what we're looking for is along the street, because
Okay.
that's what you're going to be basing your average front yard setback on.
Okay.
So limited petitioner.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
And then,
But both sides,
Both sides of Tishner.
both sides,
Both sides of Tishner? Oh, okay,
Yes.
only both sides of the street?
both
Okay,
sides of the
200.
street.
Okay, just so we know what to tell our
Sure,
surveyor and engineer
sure.
to do.
or anything under 200,
200 feet
On the
on
Tishner.
either side, either side of the street, on either side of the house?
Yes.
Okay,
That's front yard setbacks and
yes.
Okay, so, and then there's this planning comment that has, actually, it's more, again, of a debate with ourselves that has never come up before. And it's basically how you interpret the front yard setback. Nobody has brought this up in all these years. I always assumed that the setback, I interpret it as 25-foot minimum, no matter what the other properties are, and that it's an average if it's, you know, you take into the other properties if it's above 25 feet, but that it can't be more than 50 feet. That was my reading of our code.
It's the average, or the average setback, absolute minimum is 25 feet, but you can't require more than 50 feet.
So you're saying what
Setback.
I'm saying.
Yeah, but
You're
that's,
shaking your head.
What if the average is 15 feet? It still has to be 25?
still has to be 25 feet.
That's my
That's the
interpretation.
absolute minimum.
We will go back, and obviously, this will be a subject of discussion when this application is heard. I would suggest that we all kind of have to look at that.
Okay.
But it's this board's determination
Right.
about that. Ultimately,
We have to
Will.
interpret what we see in the law.
we'll add
Uh,
2 cents to it, but
That was just never a matter of, there's plenty of things that have confused me. That just was never something that,
Yeah, that's come up a lot.
yeah, and no, I don't think anybody ever said, oh, it could be anything less than 25 feet.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had the other thing is it's the question of the staircase can stick into that 25 feet, but there's it's quite a specific section, and we've gone over it a lot.
Yeah.
And we've
there are
referred to it.
exceptions to that. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, for sure.
yeah.
Okay, that's our job to decide that. That's not yours. Okay, is there any other questions for the applicant?
I just have a couple of questions related to a couple of the exemptions or waivers. One is the historic district or list, right? Isn't there a list of historic properties?
Yes.
Is there any way for us to make sure that, isn't this property, is this an old house, right? I'm sure it's not on a list, but it just in general.
You certainly
be on the list.
can
No, I'm sure.
look at. There is a list that is attached. We're very well aware of it from last evening's discussion, that there is Appendix A attached to the local landmarks ordinance. We certainly can send that out to everybody, if you would like, because
Yes, yes, well, that's a good
That's-
point. I'm chuckling at this particular
So
house.
that's a definitive list that we
Oh,
refer
yeah.
to
it's a
in any
definitive
application.
list.
But it's
At
a good
this
point.
point
A
in
general
time.
question,
Right.
because it's kind of like your point about the 200-foot rule. You know, it's, in general, it's maybe not a good idea to allow somebody to waive something because it's not in a historic district. It could be on a landmark list or whatever. The other thing is, with the trees, I'm a little concerned about an applicant determining, making the distinction of what trees are being disturbed versus
Well,
us.
I think
or
what I
staff.
heard was that it's the applicant should assume that we're gonna ask about trees on the site and the amount of disturbance to that, and that you should be prepared to testify to that.
I heard
Now,
that too, but what
and
would
I-
we base it on?
Right, because there's
Our
no,
question, without
there's
seeing
no
it on the
document.
plan.
If this board wants to have every tree or every tree beyond a certain diameter noted by the applicant, we can require that. That's our prerogative.
I must say, we have spent, we do tend to focus on trees and the disturbance of trees, and with good reason, right? And go to some lengths to make sure trees get protected where it makes sense, right? So,
If I may, I think on the plans, the engineer did depict the trees
Yeah.
and the calipers. I just didn't think he knew the species, because he's an engineer surveyor.
Oh, so the trees
Oh.
are
Oh,
shown.
so,
I believe
so
they are
all
shown
the
on
trees
surveyor
are
They are?
shown.
I thought maybe you skipped some
diameter.
while that was on
We
there.
were-
I think the waiver we asked for was for the identification of a specific species.
Then
But-
we,
No, so we
Yeah,
have,
Then
whether
we
it's an elm or a
misunderstood
Norway,
that,
maple
Well,
or
we could
something.
ask those questions easily enough, so long as the trees are shown on the plan.
I'm 99% sure.
Right,
that
that's
they-
fine. It just, I don't want to start a trend of, allowing an applicant to decide which trees we get to look at.
I was actually going to ask them how they determined whether some of the trees were, some of the trees weren't on the plan, so.
okay.
Okay,
If all
so
of them
thank you
are.
for clarifying that, Mr. Descala. So they are on there, and so you're not asking for a waiver for that?
It was just for the species. I think the zoning application said size, species.
Yeah, we don't need to know the species. Okay. We have other questions or concerns? Okay, so does the applicant understand what's being asked for the
Yes.
actual hearing?
Yes, and if our engineers have any questions, our surveyor will certainly be back in communication, just to make sure that when he prepares the supplemental site plan, that it's done correctly.
And you all understand about the notice and so on?
Yes.
Should we plan to put this on the agenda for any particular month at this point, or?
Next month?
I would think next month.
Next month? You think you can have it ready for next month? Okay, so we'll plan it for,
We have that,
we're gonna have two we probably will have two applications for that evening. So the first applicant will be, the Vikrov gas station that we will hear, and then we will hear you all second,
I think
okay?
you have to do a motion and deem the
Yeah, no,
application.
we're gonna do the completeness. Okay, so, may we have a motion on completeness?
I will move that we deem this application complete, subject to the questions that we pose to the applicant to be prepared to present at the time of the hearing.
I think we're getting something before the time.
That's what I was going to
Yes.
say.
Excuse me?
Were we getting something
Yes.
weren't we getting something before the time of hearing?
Well, we should have whatever revised site plans they have.
At least 10 days in advance.
Right.
Yes. We should have the revised site plans 10 days in advance. We should have the evidence of the properties should be on the plan. The photos should come with it. The trees are not an issue. Setbacks, you're going to put that on the plan. What else here am I missing? Am I missing anything else?
But just to be clear, we're voting here on
Yes.
deeming this application complete.
Yes.
The second question is just that the applicant understands what they need to do to be on the agenda and have the case heard in a month. And that's this checklist essentially you're going through, right?
Right.
Yes.
So,
I'll second
thank you.
Mr. Parlapiano's motion.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Don?
Yes.
Mr. Descala?
Yes.
Mr. Parlapiano?
Yes?
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Semper?
Yes.
Mr. Adler?
Yes.
And Ms. Waring?
All right. Do y'all have any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other order of business that, so, Ms. Gruhl, you're going to send the board
the landmark ordinance with the attachment that lists all of the landmark sites.
Okay, now, is that site, are those sites that are just on the National Historic Register or state, or is it just picked by, our local doyens of architecture?
No, there was a definite process by which those sites have been listed. And so several of them are on the state and national register. There's a district as well, there's several districts. But it wasn't just arbitrarily chosen. But I should note that that list may be amended in the future based upon continual surveying that the Historic Preservation Commission may be doing. So there may be supplemental landmarks that are put on the list.
Yeah, they constantly update those.
As
Correct.
things get older.
Well, they find out that Dolly Madison was born in that house.
Okay,
It's
and
all
there you
over.
go.
All right, so you can, you get us, that can just, you can send one to Jetta, and you'll then send it out to the board members.
Oh, okay.
Did we know that the gas station guys weren't
ordinance-
coming tonight?
Yes.
Oh, we did, okay.
The HPC, the ordinance actually says that if an application for development comes in to either board,
That's right.
that it automatically gets sent to the HPC by the board secretary for their review and comment.
An application for a listed property.
Once the HPC is actually up and running.
It's about to be, I
Yeah, I know.
understand, it's about to be. But that process is supposed to be automatic. It goes to them if it's on the list
For review.
for their review and comment.
And that's before completeness?
No, it's just that they have the opportunity to weigh in
Comment.
to the board.
Before the hearing, I believe
Before the
that's
hearing.
I believe that's when it
Right.
is triggered. It's got to be before the hearing and when the application is submitted. It's an advisory.
Okay.
And it is actually before completeness.
Yeah, as soon as it comes in.
It has to go out as soon as it comes in, even if it's not deemed complete, because the HPC only has a short window of
Right.
opportunity to review and make comment.
Right.
Okay, so after this meeting, let's just discuss briefly that issue that Mr. Dwyer was bringing up, because it's maybe pertinent to a change in the ordinances. All right, do we have other questions before we adjourn? The next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, March 5th at 7 p.m. Anything else? Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.